Hey, so most of you went through a second group experience with us at our discipleship training, and we've been talking about people we want to disciple. We've been encouraging you to start praying for the people that are on your heart. We've even been sharing some names, and we just wanted to take a few minutes to give you some ideas and some tips and just some thoughts so you can begin to think about building a group of disciples for the fall, so that once we've learned all this stuff and we've gone through this whole process together, you can actually get started in doing what Jesus has called you to do. And so we want to just give you a couple of ideas about picking your group wisely and picking the people who you're going to disciple in a very particular and certain way, because it shouldn't be haphazard. In fact, you see that in Jesus' example. A lot of times you look at the disciples and they look like just a ragtag bunch, but Jesus was very, very specific in the way that he picked his disciples. He picked disciples from all walks of life, different professions. They were all in different places spiritually. And in fact, he even picked some disciples that were a little bit more difficult, some that were even more needy. And interestingly enough, he even picked Judas, as you know, that ended up betraying him. And so as we look at Jesus' example, it's important that we are very specific about who we're picking for our group. Okay? You don't want to pick a group of people that are all the same exact type of people. What do I mean by that? I mean, you don't want to have a whole group of people you're discipling that are all incredibly needy people, because then you're just going to get exhausted and you're going to feel like it's time for you to quit because you've just gotten so tired and you can't even live your own life anymore. But then the flip side of that also is you don't want to pick a group that's entirely full of people that have been churched their entire life, because what's going to happen in a situation like that is they're going to be used to their routine and their normal type of Bible studies, and it's going to be hard to get them to go deeper relationally, and it's going to be hard to get them to understand what accountability and discipleship is. And so when you're beginning to build your group, you want to be looking at different types of people from different walks of life. Something else to consider too is that when you're beginning to think about people and you're beginning to build these relationships with people in the church, outside of the church, that you think you want to disciple, one thing you have to not set yourself up for is to be disappointed. You will come across people who you're going to have this great relationship with. Maybe you're hanging out with them, but maybe when you come to the point where you ask them, hey, I want you to be a part of this with me. And Mike's going to talk a little bit more about that whole process in a second, but they're not going to want it. Or maybe they're not going to want it right now, or maybe they're going to come up with excuses. Don't be disappointed by that. God is working in you. God is working in them, just like we talked about in previous weeks. You can only do your part. God's doing his part, and they have to do their part. So don't be disappointed in that. And also on top of that, you may even come across people who want to be in a Bible study with you or who want to get together with you. But you may even get to a point where you realize, man, they don't want to do discipleship biblically. And what do I mean by that? Well, a lot of people, especially people who've been in the church a long time, they don't want to be in authentic, accountable relationships. And so that's going to be another hurdle you're going to have to overcome. In fact, a good friend of mine told me this story about a Bible study that he attended. It was a men's breakfast, I think, that happens weekly. And how he went to this, and there's a group of 8 or 10 guys there, and the pastor of the church was there, and the pastor asked a really deep personal question, and not a single one of the men wanted to answer the question, and they all just went about their conversation about sports and politics, and just left the pastor in the dust. And so you're going to come across those people that A, don't want to be discipled, but B, maybe they're going to jump into it with you, but then when you start to go a little bit deeper with them, they're going to be hesitant. And so right off the bat, we just want to say, with these people that you're beginning to think about, pray about, and discuss and talk to and build relationships with, don't get disappointed, because you're going to get to that stage. So what are you looking for? And we don't want to give you a whole lot of detail about the nuts and the bolts of what the group is going to be like yet, but we want to give you some things that you can be looking for when we're talking about this group of people you're going to be discipling. And as you guys know, Mike and I have been playing with this over the last year to kind of find the sweet spot with the type of people and number of people that you should be discipling. And where we've kind of come to is that a group of people of about 5 or 6 is just the right amount of people, because actually what we found is that on a given day where you're meeting with the guys in your group or the girls in your group, actually a group of 3 or 4 or 5 is the best number of people where you can have the deepest conversations, trust and relationship can be formed, and sharing can happen. If it gets much bigger than that, some people are going to have a hard time sharing. So if you have 5 or 6 people that are in your group and you're missing 1 or 2 a week, that puts you right in that sweet spot of 3 to 4 people. The other thing you want to be looking for is same gender. As of right now, we want the groups to be either female groups or male groups. Now, there's always going to be room for discussion on that, and if you're at a place where you want to talk about a group that's going to be mixed gender, come and talk to us about it, because we're totally flexible with that. But let's talk about it, because right now we're thinking 5 to 6, and gender is important, that females are with females and males are with males. And now we're going to talk a little bit about what to look for in the person. And I would say number one, right off the top of my heart and mind, is hunger. You need to look for people that are hungry. Now, that doesn't mean they have to be hungry for Scripture. That doesn't come right away. They might not be hungry for church. They might not be hungry even for God. They might not even be hungry for spirituality. But maybe they're hungry for relationship. Maybe they're hungry for friendship. Maybe they're hungry for help. Maybe they're lonely and they could use a group of friends. And so it could be hunger in any type of way. Maybe they are hungry for God or hungry spiritually. Maybe they've had a major falling out in their family or some major issue in their family, and they just need people right now. And so you want to look for people that are hungry and are ready to either come into relationship or are hungry for things of God.
That's great stuff, Daniel, and I'm glad that we circled back around to hunger. And one of the easy ways that we have learned to distinguish what that hunger is an acronym called FAT, F-A-T, and of course we're not talking about people who are obese. But FAT stands for faithful, available, and teachable. And those are the characteristics that you want to look for. Those are the core characteristics of a person and their character. They're faithful. So as you're observing their life, do they stick with things? Are they loyal? Are they trustworthy? Are they faithful? The second thing is, are they available? Will they make time for you? I know I have in at least many cases, chased a friend who turned out they just didn't want to be too available for me, and I had to let that go and cut it loose. So are they available? Are they willing to come into your life and allow you into theirs? And the last thing, the T, is are they teachable? And this you can tell with a person's demeanor. Are they able to learn? Do they enjoy learning? Do they approach life with a humble attitude? Are they willing to be poured into? Are they learners? We've learned many times that disciples are learners. We're making disciples of Jesus Christ. Well, we're learning His way of life, His way of viewing the world, His way of living, the way of the kingdom on this earth. And so faithful, available, teachable, those are the attributes of a person that you want to be looking for. And I know you have to say a little bit more about that, but also about counting the cost.
Well, it all kind of fits together. We're kind of sandwiching this whole idea of the acronym FAT with, are they hungry? Are they hungry for something else in their life? And then finally, are they willing to count the cost? And are you willing to count the cost? And when you talk about somebody who's faithful and available, when you're thinking of people that you want in your group and you want to invite someone into your group, it's so important that, and this doesn't have to be some handwritten, sign on the line agreement, but you want to make sure that the people that you're asking into your group are going to be committed and that they're going to have counted the cost. Am I willing to give up 90 minutes of my week? Am I willing to hang out with these people? Am I willing to share my life with these people? And you don't have to get all of these agreements hammered out right at the beginning, but the big one is this person even going to show up for me? I shared with many of you, I think it was last week or the week before, about a man that I have chased and chased and chased, and Mike has chased men in his life too for discipleship, and if they haven't counted the cost of being willing to show up and give you even just that little bit of time, then sometimes you just have to let them go, let the fish go, let it grow up a little bit, and then come back to it later. And then the other side of counting the cost is it's important that we count the cost. And this comes back to what I was talking about in the beginning. You need to make sure that when you're selecting people from your group, you're counting the cost of each person there. Do you have time for all of these people's needs? And so that's why it's so important to have different types of people in your group. One very needy person in your group is great. 2 or 3 is going to be really tough. And same thing with being over-churched. You don't want a whole group of over-churched. And so make sure when you're looking at these people that you're thinking about inviting into your group to disciple, it's varied, and they're not going to be so needy that it's going to exhaust you.
Well, I'm glad you brought up that terminology of fishing because that's exactly how I think about putting a group together of disciples. And so how does that happen? How do you put a group together? Well, we're just going to cover the basics right now, but in terms of fishing, I think of fishing in three different places. There's fishing in a pond, there's fishing in a lake, and then you have fishing in the ocean. And so fishing in the pond for me, that's pulling disciples from people that I already know. I already have a direct relationship with them, and it's going to be friends, it's going to be family, somebody who I know needs relational discipleship. And so that's where I fish from there. I also like to fish from the lake. And in the lake, can be compared to, like, let's say church, where we don't know everybody. They're familiar, but we don't actually know them. We're not involved in their lives. And so when we put together groups of disciples, we want to also be drawing from the lake. And Daniel spoke earlier about the type of churched person you want to look for, not an over-churched person, but somebody who is faithful, available, teachable, Christian. And then the third place is the wide open ocean. And I'll tell you what, that's wherever you go throughout your day. I mean, if you were to watch a video of yourself walking around and interacting with people, you would see that people notice you, that people appreciate your smile, that people want to interact with you. And that's the ocean. You could find anything, whatever you pull up on that reel, it could be anything. And so if there's a place in your day or a routine that you stick to, the gym, Starbucks, the market, gas station, if you keep running into that same person over and over again, and God is making your heart grow warm towards them for discipleship, then you want to approach them. You want to fish in the ocean and pull a complete stranger into your group. And so those are the three places that we can fish. How to initiate the relationship, especially in the lake and in the ocean, is just becoming a person who is very interested in others. When other people become intriguing to you, when you want to know about their lives, when you want to open up that part of yourself to another person who's basically a stranger, you have to be interested. You have to be genuinely interested in what makes them tick, what do they like, what do they do, those sorts of things. And so that's how you initiate that. To start the discipleship conversation, you just want to turn the corner spiritually. And a way that I like to do that is I just say, hey, I'm pursuing God's direction for my life, and I'm looking to build a group of men, or in your case, maybe a group of women. I'm looking to build a group who is pursuing God's direction in their life, and that group is going to be 100% about that. And so, does that sound like anything interesting to you? Then get their response. And if they're not interested, then you know. It's like Daniel said, you throw them back in the water, they need to grow a little. Mm-hmm. But chances are, if God's put them on your heart, they're going to be interested. And so God continually puts people, actively places people, drops them in our life for the purpose of relational discipleship, and we have to pursue it as intentional leaders. So start that prayer list. I love to just jot names down and start praying for them every day. As I get going in the morning, I pray for them. I ask God to make them faithful, available, teachable people. And then I just shoot them a text. I'll give them a quick phone call. I'll bump into them again where they're working or wherever they congregate, and or at church. And you just continue to build that relationship forward. So I know you want to talk about how to get us started.
Well, that's what we really want you to do now. That's what this video is about. Is we don't want to give you all the nuts and bolts about what the group is going to be like right now or how to even get rolling on that. What we want you to do right now is focus on the list and focus on exactly like Mike talked about, the people that God is dropping into your life. Because if you open your eyes and your heart, God is placing people in your life at every juncture. In the pond, in your neighborhood, in your family, in your circle of friends already. There's also all kinds of people at church that need this. And not only that, you bump into people all the time. And so as God is dropping those people in your life, in the pond, the lake, the ocean, begin to build those relationships. Begin to think intentionally. That's a big word that we've talked about. Beginning to have those friendship conversations with them, and even maybe drop in on some little spiritual conversation here and there just to whet their appetite, and that'll help you to decipher where they're at. And then begin writing that list of people and be praying for them all the time, every day, and getting ready for that opportunity to start asking him the question to get involved in that group with you. And so we want you to have that list, begin jotting those names down. And in the coming weeks, we want to begin to continue to talk through that list with you. We want to hear those names that you've got, and we want to pray together about them. So that's what we want you to do right now. We're about halfway through the training now. We've got another 6 weeks or so after this, and then we're going to be jumping into this and giving you another video about some more nuts and bolts about actually getting started. But for now, be writing that list, be praying for people.